This is a day that you've had one of those days in the classroom that was just kind of stressful because things didn't quite go like you anticipated. And one of your students is not quite in meltdown mode, but is clearly having some problems. And you, as the teacher, are going to have to draw from your grab bag of tools and figure out how you can help this student who is in a state of crisis, how you can help this student get back to equilibrium. So you have at this point completed and turned in the locating resources assignment. And this had you delve into both a large school and a small school and see what kind of resources are available, not only within the school, but also within the community. You did some analyzing of some of the elements that make up trauma-informed school. And now you're going to be applying some of those to this student. So for this key assessment, there is a template here that shows you each part that you're going to address. And it seems to have an extra page there on the end. And the directions for it are located here. So we can see how it's tied to our CAPE standards. And we also see that we're going to need a short excerpt from the workbook that goes along with the Help for Billy textbook. And I have, I show you what that looks like right here. This is not really imperative for you to have, but it is really good information because it looks at what might happen in a debriefing discussion following someone observing your class and looking at the student's behavior and what you're doing to promote these good, positive relationships. So I just gave this to you so that you could see where these questions on the actual assignment came from. For example, in part 1, relationships and family culture, two questions are summarized from these. And the same thing for regulation, about how you're helping regulate the language that's used. And that includes your language and the child's language and how you address the situation, the safety and the discipline and empowerment. And we're not necessarily looking at ways to discipline the student, but to help that student gain equilibrium, come out of that negative state of crisis and help them regain balance. That's the overview of what you're going to be doing. For this assignment, you're going to assume that you have that student who might be like Billy from your textbook, except you're kind of creating the student. It could be your portfolio student, or it could be a completely different student. You can create the student how you want to, but have that student in mind. What grade is the student in? What class is it in? Is the student male, female? Maybe consider other kinds of diversity, such as socioeconomic status, any kind of physical disability, homelessness, ethnicity, weight, just things to keep in mind as you are considering this child's behavior and how you're going to help this child. Now, consider a lesson that you taught today or one day and how the student responded in class that indicates that there's some challenging behavior, particularly leading to something of a crisis, and how you, the teacher, responded. So we're going to use the assignment template, which I showed you earlier, and then this provides a little bit more detailed information. You're going to respond to each prompt from this and focus this on your focus student. So the first 2 lessons are, how would you describe your classroom culture? And again, about 2 to 4 sentences for each of these. And think of the culture, not only what it looks like, not only what is on the board, but how does it feel? When your students come into the room, how does it feel to them? How does it feel to you? Think of ways to describe that and discuss how you promote these positive relationships between students. And then the next part on regulation, you're talking about the lesson and your focus student and how you knew that your focus student was getting to a crisis stage. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you really notice in this student? Then, was there a time during this when you needed to explore what was really going on instead of just telling the child possibly to sit down, be quiet, we'll deal with this later? Or was there a point where you felt like you really didn't understand what was going on, and maybe you needed to delve into some depth with this student and find out why? Maybe this is completely non-typical behavior for this student. Now, when we talk about safety here, particularly, we're talking about physical safety. Of course, there are other kinds of safety, but at this point, is the child doing anything that could lead to someone being injured? That could include something small like throwing cards that could accidentally hit someone in the eye. Is the child removing a belt and trying to swing it? Is the child trying to pull something out from the shelf and trying to climb up high to reach something? What is the student doing? And that's up to you as to whether it's something that could become unsafe. Now, this is very important, the discipline and empowerment. Did you use or did you see restorative practices being used with this student? Keep in mind that restorative practices are what we use to help students cope, to help them manage their own behavior and take responsibility for their own actions. I don't really like the word discipline even being used here with it, because it's not about you're in trouble, you're going to stay in for recess all week long. That's not empowering the student, and that is not related to restoring the practices. Restorative justice, restorative practices go along with what was the infraction and how can the student go about making it right. Here is an example of a paper that I will share with you under the assignments tab that gives you a reminder, since you've already read about restorative justice, it gives you a reminder about what restorative justice is and way that we ask questions, or ways that we don't make statements like, stop that right now, or sit down, you need to be listening. You know, when we see that student beginning to react in a negative way, whether it's going to be physically harmful or not, we need to try to find out what's going on so that we can help the child better understand what's happening and how to ultimately deal with that. Notice that in these questions, the last one, what do you think needs to be done to make things as right as possible? Well, maybe this student accidentally broke a box of crayons that belonged to another student. And if that's the case, then maybe the student offers to share crayons for the rest of the week with this student. So here are some examples that you can read through as a reminder to what restorative justice is. And so then the next part, what accommodations are in place? Maybe there are no accommodations in place. Maybe you are finding that you're going to have to provide some accommodations for the student in your classroom, unless the student is already on a 504 plan or an IEP. And remember that the 504 plan is for physical issues that could be diabetes, it could be hearing or visual impairment. It could be a student who has lost use of some fingers and has difficulty handwriting. And then the IEP is for those that need help with academic skills. The next part, now you're going to pull from either one of the two schools, and I suggest you go with the one for which you found the most information in your identifying resources assignment. Now, from that, you're going to pick two of these resources for your kid in class. One of the resources should be specific to the school. It might have something to do with the counseling department or a calm down room, or a person, possibly an aide who would come and try to work with any students who are having this kind of situation. And then the other one should be specific to the community. And this could be related to Boys and Girls Club, or maybe there is a Girl Scout or Boy Scout troop at a local church. But you're going to identify these and then provide a short paragraph over each one of these. Now, part 3, for using resources, you're going to discuss how you will use these resources to help the student self-regulate, so that when that moment of crisis is looming, when you're starting to see the pattern, this is how you're going to help your student, language you can use, or strategies that you can take to help the student recognize it as well and try to stave these off. And then you're going to conclude with your expectations for how effective do you think these 2 resources are. The conclusion should be the most developed section for part 3, because your conclusion is your analysis. Let's say that you have decided that your student is a male, and a great resource might be Boy Scout troop at a church that's 2 blocks away, and it meets after school from 5 to 6. Well, that sounds like a great plan, and the student's able to go once, but then you realize that, oh, he doesn't have transportation, so that's not going to be particularly effective for him. And if that's the case, is there anything you can help assist with? Does the school provide any busing that late? Possibly, probably not, but that would be something that you could look into as you are analyzing the effectiveness of the 2 resources. So the link to the template is down here, but it's also available on Chalk and Wire. So look under assignments and you will be able to find the instructions for this key assessment.